The stop he almost didn't make. The worst days always start quietly. Not with explosions or shouting or obvious signs of disaster, but with silence, routine, and the heavy feeling that settles in your chest before you even know why. Mark Turner didn't recognize it at first. He was too busy wiping grease from his hands with a rag that had once been white. Standing in the narrow driveway of his small rented house, watching the sky shift slowly toward evening. 6:42 p.m. The numbers on his watch glared back at him. 48 minutes until his blind date. Mark exhaled slowly, the kind of breath that came from deep in the lungs, the kind meant to calm nerves but rarely successful. His shoulders ached from a long day at the auto shop, his knuckles scraped and sore, and all he wanted was to go inside, heat up leftover pasta, and read his daughter one more story before bed. Instead, he was supposed to meet a stranger and pretend his life wasn't already full. Blind dates were uncomfortable for anyone. For Mark, they felt like emotional landmines. Step wrong once, and everything exploded. He tossed the rag onto the workbench and glanced toward the house. The porch light was already on. Inside, Lily would be finishing her homework at the kitchen table, her tongue sticking out slightly as she concentrated, just like her mother used to do. The thought tightened his chest. "Dad!" Lily's voice floated through the open window. "Amy's here!" Of course she was. His sister never missed a chance to meddle. Mark forced himself to smile as he walked inside. Amy stood by the counter, purse on her shoulder, phone already in hand. "You're still covered in grease," she said, eyeing him. "We're leaving in 10. "I didn't say I was going," Mark replied. Amy raised an eyebrow. "You didn't say you weren't." Lily looked between them, sensing tension. "Where are you going?" "Dinner," Amy said quickly. "Your dad's meeting a friend." Mark shot her a look, but Lily's eyes had already lit up. "Like, a date?" she asked. He hesitated. "Sort of." Lily smiled mischievously. "Does she like pancakes?" Amy laughed. "We'll find out," Mark sighed, rubbing his face. "You're impossible, and you're lonely," Amy countered softly. "Even if you won't admit it," he didn't respond. Because the worst part was she wasn't wrong. By the time Mark got into his old pickup truck, his tie sat crooked, his shirt still smelled faintly of oil despite his best efforts, and his stomach twisted with something between dread and resignation. He didn't expect anything from tonight. Just another polite conversation? Another careful explanation about his daughter? Another forced smile when the woman inevitably said, "You're a great guy, but—" Those words had become familiar. "But I'm not ready to be around a kid. But my life is complicated, but I don't think I can handle that responsibility." Mark didn't blame them. He really didn't. Lily wasn't baggage, she was his world. But he understood that not everyone wanted to step into a world already built around bedtime routines, school pickups, and quiet sacrifices. So he drove, hands tight on the steering wheel, already rehearsing how the evening would end. Then he saw the car. It was just ahead, pulled awkwardly onto the shoulder of the road, hazard lights blinking against the dimming sky. A silver sedan who'd popped open, steam drifting upward like a distress signal no one wanted to answer. Mark slowed without realizing it. A woman stood beside the car, one heel dangling from her hand. Hair pulled back in a loose knot that was clearly losing its battle. She crossed her arms against the evening breeze, shifting her weight as another car sped past without stopping. Mark's foot hovered over the brake. "Don't," he muttered aloud. He glanced at the clock on the dashboard, late already. He could keep driving. Plenty of people would. Most people did. But then the woman kicked the tire lightly in frustration, and something about the gesture too human, too tired hit him square in the chest. He pulled over. The truck came to a stop behind the sedan, and for a moment, Mark just sat there, hands still on the wheel, wondering why he always did this to himself. Then he stepped out. "Hey," he called gently, not wanting to startle her. The woman turned sharply, eyes wide at first, then visibly relieved. "Oh, thank God," she said. "I was starting to think I was invisible." Mark smiled faintly. "Car trouble?" "I think my car just gave up on life," she replied, attempting humor that didn't quite mask her stress. "And it picked the worst possible time to do it." "Cars are dramatic like that," Mark said as he walked closer. "Mind if I take a look?" "Please," she said, stepping aside. "I'll take any help I can get." He lifted the hood, heat washing over his face. Overheating, he murmured. Did you notice the temperature gauge? She shook her head. I noticed smoke and panicked. That's fair, he said. He worked quickly, hands moving out of muscle memory more than thought. Radiator hose loose, not ruptured. Simple fix? As he tightened the clamp, she leaned against the car, watching him. I'm Rachel, she said after a moment. Mark, thank you for stopping, she added. Seriously. Everyone else just kept driving, he shrugged. Didn't feel right not to. Silence settled comfortably between them, broken only by the faint hiss of cooling metal. Long day? She asked. He huffed a quiet laugh. You could say that. Same, she said. This was not how I planned my evening. Me neither. She glanced at him curiously. Can I guess? He raised an eyebrow. You're dressed like someone who cleaned up in a hurry, she said. And you look like you'd rather be anywhere else? Mark chuckled despite himself. Blind date? Her eyes widened. No way. Unfortunately, she groaned. I'm on my way to one too. That surprised him. Really? Yes, and I already hate him, she said. Which feels unfair, considering we haven't met. Mark laughed, a real laugh, unguarded. I feel that. Something eased between them then, like tension released from a tightly wound spring. They talked while he worked, about bad days that piled up without permission, about blind dates arranged by well-meaning relatives, about how adulthood had somehow become heavier than either of them remembered signing up for. Her laugh came easily, ringing out into the quiet road, and each time, Mark felt it tug at something he'd kept locked away. Okay, he said finally, stepping back. That should do it. Just take it easy and get it checked tomorrow. She let out a breath she'd clearly been holding. You are a lifesaver. Just a guy with a wrench, he replied. She studied him for a moment, then smiled. Can I buy you coffee sometime? As a thank you? The offer caught him off guard. Before he could answer, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He didn't need to check it to know who it was. Amy, please don't cancel, the text read. She's great, Mark swallowed. I've got somewhere to be, he said slowly. Thank you. Rachel nodded, disappointment flickering briefly across her face before she masked it with a smile. Right, the dreaded date, yeah. Well, she said, opening her car door, good luck, Mark. You too, he replied. I hope yours is less dreadful. She laughed softly. Me too. Mark stepped back as she drove away, the silver sedan merging back onto the road, hazard lights finally off. He stood there longer than necessary, watching the empty stretch of asphalt where she'd been. Only when his phone buzzed again did he snap out of it. He got back into his truck, pulling onto the road, his thoughts strangely tangled. He hadn't even met his date yet, and already he was thinking about someone else. As the restaurant's lights appeared in the distance, Mark felt an unfamiliar pull in his chest. Not dread this time, but curiosity. He didn't know it yet, but that stop he almost didn't make had already changed the course of his evening, and maybe much more than that. The dreaded date revealed the restaurant was warm and softly lit, the kind of place designed to make people linger, muted jazz playing low, candles flickering on small wooden tables, the scent of garlic and roasted herbs hanging in the air. It should have been comforting. But the moment Mark Turner stepped inside, he felt cold. Not the physical kind of cold, the deeper kind. The kind that crept in when your instincts whispered that something important was about to happen, and you weren't sure whether it would heal you or hurt you. He paused just inside the entrance, fingers tightening around his phone. One unread message glowed on the screen. Her name is Rachel. Please don't panic. Amy. Mark exhaled slowly through his nose. Too late, he muttered. He slid the phone into his pocket and scanned the room, preparing himself mentally, a polite smile. A firm handshake. The careful moment where he would mention Lily not too early. Not too late, watching for that subtle shift in expression that always came. He took 2 steps forward. Mark? The voice was soft, familiar, his stomach dropped. He turned and froze. She stood just a few feet away, near the host stand, the woman from the roadside. Her hair was down now, falling in loose waves around her shoulders. The tension he'd seen earlier had softened, replaced by cautious surprise. But those eyes, he recognized them instantly. Oh, she said, breathless, like the word escaped before she could stop it. Oh, Mark echoed, equally helpless. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. The world narrowed to the space between them, realization crashing down all at once. Then Rachel laughed. It wasn't loud. It wasn't forced. It was surprised, nervous, and completely genuine. So, she said, folding her arms loosely as if grounding herself. You're the blind date I already hated? Mark barked out a laugh before he could stop himself. And you're the stranger who completely ruined my emotional defenses. She covered her mouth, still laughing. I cannot believe this. Same, he said, shaking his head. I mean, what are the odds? Apparently very good, she replied. The hostess cleared her throat politely. Table for Mark and Rachel? They exchanged a look. I guess that's us, Rachel said. They followed the hostess through the restaurant, still smiling in disbelief, the tension between them now charged with something unexpected. When they sat down across from each other, the awkwardness Mark had braced himself for never quite arrived. Instead, there was an odd sense of familiarity, like picking up a conversation paused rather than starting one from scratch. Well, Rachel said, reaching for her menu, this is definitely not how I imagined tonight. Mark smiled. Same, I was expecting. Much worse. Hey, she said lightly, you hated me first. True, he admitted, but only in theory. They ordered drinks, and as the server walked away, silence settled briefly between them, not uncomfortable, just thoughtful. So, Rachel said finally, tilting her head, do you want to pretend we didn't already meet on the side of the road? Mark considered it. No, I kind of like knowing you yell at your car when it betrays you, she laughed. And I like knowing you stop for stranded strangers even when you're late. Something in her tone made his chest tighten. Dinner arrived, and conversation flowed more easily than Mark had expected. Rachel talked about her work as an interior designer, how she loved transforming neglected spaces into something warm and livable. She spoke with her hands, animated and thoughtful, and Mark found himself watching more than listening at times. When she asked about him, he didn't dodge the questions. He told her about the auto shop, about long days and honest work, about how fixing engines felt simpler than navigating emotions. Eventually, inevitably, the topic shifted. I have a daughter, Mark said, setting his fork down. Her name's Lily, she's 6. He waited. Rachel didn't flinch, didn't stiffen, didn't glance away. Instead, her eyes softened. What's she like? She asked. The question caught him off guard. Mark swallowed. Smart, curious, too honest for her own good. He smiled despite himself. She loves pancakes and insists they taste better when she helps. Rachel smiled warmly. She sounds wonderful. She is, he said quietly. They talked about Lily for several minutes, about bedtime stories, school projects, and the terrifying realization that kids grew faster than you were ever ready for. Mark found himself telling Rachel about learning to braid hair from YouTube tutorials, about early mornings and tired evenings, about the quiet pride that came with being the person someone depended on completely. She's lucky, Rachel said when he finished. The words landed heavier than she knew. Mark shifted in his seat, discomfort rising. Most people don't think so. Rachel frowned slightly. Why wouldn't they? He hesitated, then shrugged. Because being with me means being with her. And not everyone wants that. Rachel met his gaze steadily. Then most people are wrong. For the first time in a long while, Mark didn't feel the urge to apologize for his life. Still, fear lingered beneath the surface, quiet but persistent. The voice that whispered, "This won't last." The voice that reminded him how many times hope had felt foolish before. As dinner continued, Mark noticed it happening small moments where he started pulling back, choosing safer answers, guarding his expressions, protecting something he wasn't sure he should offer. Rachel noticed too. "Hey," she said gently, resting her elbow on the table. "You okay?" He hesitated, honesty won out. "I'm just not great at this part." "What part?" The part where things are going well," he said with a self-conscious smile. "I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop." Rachel studied him for a moment. "You don't trust good timing?" "I don't trust good timing sticking around." She nodded slowly, understanding flickering in her eyes. "I get that." She told him then about moving back to town to care for her mother before she passed, about how grief rearranged your priorities without asking permission, about how her social circle had shrunk quietly, leaving blind dates as a last resort rather than a hopeful adventure. I didn't come tonight expecting anything, she admitted. I just didn't want to stay home. Mark felt something shift inside him, a shared understanding, a familiar ache. They finished dinner slowly, neither eager for it to end. Outside, the night air was cool and calm. The parking lot was dimly lit, the restaurant glowing warmly behind them. I should go, Mark said reluctantly. Lily's with my neighbor, but I don't like staying out too late. Rachel nodded. That makes sense. They stood there for a moment, neither quite ready to say goodbye. You know, Rachel said softly, on the side of the road. I didn't feel nervous talking to you, Mark smiled. Me neither. She met his eyes. That feels rare. It does. He hesitated, then said, about that coffee you offered earlier. Her smile widened. I meant it. So did I, he replied. They exchanged numbers, hands brushing briefly, a small contact that sent a surprising spark through him. As Mark drove away, he realized something unexpected. For the first time in years, he wasn't replaying the evening looking for mistakes. He was wondering what might come next. And that thought, terrifying and hopeful all at once, followed him all the way home. Sometimes the dates you dread the most are the ones that don't end when the night does. Letting the guard down as the evening wore on, something subtle shifted inside Mark. It wasn't obvious at first. There was no sudden silence, no awkward pause that announced the change. It crept in quietly the way old habits always did. His answers grew shorter. His laughter softened. His shoulders tightened just enough to notice if you were paying attention. Rachel was paying attention. She noticed the way his eyes drifted toward the window more often. The way he paused before answering questions he'd already answered easily an hour earlier. The way he smiled but didn't quite let it reach his eyes. Did I say something wrong? She asked gently, setting her glass down. Mark blinked, surprised. What? No, not at all. Rachel tilted her head, studying him. You went somewhere just now. He hesitated, fingers tracing the edge of the table. He could lie? He'd done it before, offered a reassuring smile, brushed it off, changed the subject. That was safer. But something about Rachel made lying feel heavier than truth. He exhaled. I don't want to waste your time, Rachel frowned. Why would you? He laughed quietly, not humorously. Because that's usually how this goes. She waited. I'm complicated, he continued. Single dad, limited time, emotional baggage I don't even always recognize until it trips me. Rachel met his eyes, steady and calm. I'm not looking for easy. The words landed firmly, not dramatic or defensive, just honest. Mark looked away, swallowing. Most people say that at first, Rachel didn't argue. She just nodded. And some people mean it. They finished their drinks in thoughtful silence, the earlier lightness now layered with something deeper. Not heavier, just real. Outside, the night had cooled. The restaurant's lights cast a soft glow across the parking lot, and the hum of distant traffic filled the quiet. They walked side by side toward their cars, steps slow, neither rushing to end the evening. This is usually the part, Mark said after a moment, where things change. Rachel glanced at him. How so? I explained my life, he said, in more detail, and I watched the realization settle in. That sounds exhausting. It is. He told her then about the dates that went well until they didn't, about the women who smiled politely but slowly faded away once they understood what being with him actually meant, about the careful balance of hope and self-protection he'd learned to maintain. I don't blame them, he added quickly. It's a lot. Rachel listened without interrupting, her hands tucked into her coat pockets, her expression open. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. You know why today felt different? She said finally. Mark shrugged. Better chemistry? She smiled softly. Because on the roadside, neither of us was trying to impress the other. He stopped walking. She turned to face him. You weren't single dad Mark or first date Mark. You were just a guy helping a stranger. And I wasn't trying to be interesting or charming. I was stressed and stranded. The truth of it hit him harder than he expected. That's Accurate, he admitted. That's what I liked, she said gently. They stood there, the air between them charged with understanding rather than tension. Mark glanced toward his truck, then back at her. About that coffee you offered earlier. Rachel's smile returned, warm and unguarded. I meant it. So did I, he said. They exchanged a longer look this time, one that lingered just enough to matter. As Mark drove home later, the road seemed quieter than before. His thoughts replayed the evening, not for mistakes, but for moments. Her laugh, the way she listened. The way she didn't look away when things got complicated. At home, Lily was already asleep. Mark stood in her doorway for a while, watching her chest rise and fall, her stuffed bear tucked under her arm. You okay, kiddo? He whispered, even though she couldn't hear him. He shut the door softly and sat at the kitchen table, phone in hand. A message blinked on the screen. Rachel, I'm glad we didn't pretend we hadn't already met. Mark smiled before typing back. Mark, me too. Roadside honesty might be my new favorite thing. The reply came almost immediately. Rachel, then I'll see you for coffee? He hesitated only a second before answering. Mark, I'd like that. He set the phone down, heart thudding with something unfamiliar, not fear, not excitement exactly, but a quiet openness. The kind that comes when you stop bracing for loss long enough to let possibility breathe. Mark didn't know where this would lead. He didn't know how Rachel would fit into the careful structure of his life, or if she would at all. But for the first time in a long while, he wasn't closing the door before someone had a chance to walk through it. And that felt like the most important step of all. The repair that changed everything weeks past, not quickly, not dramatically, but in the quiet, steady way that real change usually happens. Coffee came first. The kind that started as a simple thank you and turned into long conversations that stretched past empty cups and cold refills. They met at a small cafe near the park. One with mismatched chairs and a chalkboard menu that never quite erased cleanly. At first, they talked about safe things, work, favorite movies, places they'd never been. But slowly, the conversations deepened. Coffee turned into walks through the park afterward, the kind where neither of them checked the time. Autumn had started to settle in, leaves crunching underfoot. The air cool enough to make excuses for walking closer together. And then one Saturday morning, Lily asked the question. Is Rachel coming today? Mark paused mid-motion, keys in hand. Why? Lily shrugged, trying to sound casual and failing. I like her. Something warm spread through his chest, followed quickly by fear. She's busy today, he said gently. Lily nodded, accepting the answer, but the seed had already been planted. Mark was careful. He didn't rush introductions. He didn't blur boundaries. Lily had already lost too much to have people come and go casually. Mark had promised himself no one met his daughter unless he believed they might stay. Rachel never pushed. When he mentioned Lily, Rachel listened. When he canceled plans because Lily had a fever or a school event, Rachel didn't sigh or complain. She simply said, "Of course, we can reschedule." That mattered more than she knew. The first time Rachel met Lily wasn't planned. It happened at the park. Mark had taken Lily there after school, the sun low and golden, when he heard his name. Mark? He turned to see Rachel standing near the walking path, surprise lighting her face. She wore jeans and a sweater, hair pulled back casually like she hadn't spent an hour deciding what to wear. "Oh," she said, smiling. "Hi." Lily looked up at him. "Daddy?" "This is Rachel," Mark said carefully, "a friend." Rachel immediately knelt down to Lily's level. "Hi, Lily. Your dad tells me you make the best pancakes." Lily's eyes widened. "With chocolate chips," Rachel gasped dramatically. "That's the secret ingredient," Lily giggled. Mark watched closely, heart pounding, but Rachel didn't try too hard. She didn't overwhelm Lily with questions or affection. She just listened, asked about school, admired Lily's sneakers like they were the coolest thing she'd ever seen. No pretending, no forcing, just presence. That night, after Lily fell asleep, Mark sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at his phone. "You okay?" Rachel texted. "Yeah," he replied. "Just thinking. About today?" He hesitated. "She liked you." The response came quickly. "I like her too." Mark set the phone down, chest tight with something dangerously close to hope. The weeks unfolded gently. Rachel became a familiar name in the house. Sometimes she joined them at the park. Sometimes she didn't. Mark noticed how Lily never asked when Rachel wasn't there, but smiled when she was. One evening, as Mark tucked Lily into bed, she grew unusually quiet. "Daddy?" she whispered. "Yeah, kiddo." "Are you scared Rachel will leave?" The question landed like a weight on his chest. Mark sat on the edge of the bed, choosing honesty. "A little." Lily rolled onto her side, hugging her stuffed bear. "I don't think she will." He brushed hair from her forehead. "Why not?" Lily smiled sleepily. "She listens, and she likes fixing things." Mark swallowed hard. After Lily drifted off, he stood in the doorway longer than usual, watching her breathe. Realizing something had shifted, not just in his life, but in hers. Later that night, sitting on the couch with Rachel, Mark finally said what he'd been holding back. "I almost didn't stop that night," he admitted. Rachel turned to him. "What?" "I was late, tired, already dreading the evening. I saw your car and told myself to keep driving." Her eyes softened. "But you didn't." "No," he said quietly. "And I don't think I've ever been more glad about ignoring myself." She smiled. "I'm glad you didn't too." He took her hand then slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to. She didn't. "I used to dread blind dates," Mark said. "Turns out I just dreaded the wrong people." Rachel squeezed his fingers gently. "Good thing my car broke down." They laughed softly, but the moment held more weight than humor. Outside, the night was calm. Inside, something felt settled in a way Mark hadn't felt in years. He didn't know what the future would look like. He didn't know how long this would last, or what challenges waited ahead. But for the first time since his life had changed so suddenly and painfully, he wasn't planning for loss. He was making room. Sometimes love doesn't arrive with perfect timing. Sometimes it shows up on the side of the road, unexpected, inconvenient, and impossible to ignore. And sometimes all it takes to change everything is stopping when you almost didn't.